Morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this morning's webinar on creating web applications using FME. We have a great registration list today, which is really, really positive. It's obviously quite a hot topic, and Gavin's going to walk through it today. He has slightly tweaked it to try cover a few different topics, like not just FME Server Apps, but also to cover in Data Express and Webhooks as well. So it's going to be quite an interesting webinar. So, Gavin, do you want to click to the next slide? Yep. So just in terms of who's here, so I have Tanya from marketing who's sitting across from me here, tentatively listening in. And then I have obviously Gavin on the phone, who most people will be familiar with. He has this very professional screenshot of himself, unlike mine, which is a bit wonky when I used to shave my head. But Gavin is our lead technical solutions architect, and yeah, you can see his Twitter handle there, and he's our certified trainer, FME desktop professional, and he is our server as well. Me, unfortunately, I don't have any of those fancy titles, but again, I'm quite familiar with everyone on the list. I'm Gareth Conan, I'm the new commercial, well, not new, but I'm the commercial manager in IMGS. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin, who's going to go through the content itself, and then I'll jump back in at the end. Just one last point is that please don't be shy asking questions. So ask away, and we'll do our best at the end of the webinar to come back to everybody. If we can't, I can email you directly whatever answers that we have to be kind of stump Gavin, which I want you to do, and we can come back to you with the response. Thanks, Gavin.
Good. Okay. Let's say, just in terms of what we were going to cover, I think the title of the webinar was FME for Web Applications, and that kind of within the context of FME Server really kind of breaks down into the new FME Server Apps. Back a slide. The FME Server Webhooks. And these are really kind of where you can start to build a web application, whether that's externally facing, going out to the public, or if that's actually just an internal application. It doesn't really matter when you build it from FME Server. That's really just a kind of an infrastructure for making that available discussion. And then lastly, we'll touch on the mobile server application that SAFE have released. Really because it starts to tie into the FME Server Apps. So what you can do with the FME Server Apps works with the mobile application as well now. So we'll go into a little bit of detail about what that does and how that can run through and things. So just take a little bit of a step back first and just kind of really go through a little bit about the FME platform. Now, most of you are going to be familiar with all of the different FME components, but it's really just to say that SAFE are moving away from this being, you know, that FME desktop that's sat in the corner of somebody's office, they process a little bit of data with. You know, it's traditionally been the GIS person or the planning person who's had it sat there. And really what they're doing is focusing on making this something that the whole enterprise can use. So everything in the organization, you know, everybody can pick this up and run with this kind of platform and make workspaces available. And it's kind of a bit of a shift in their thinking, more than anything, and just the way that you can start to use it. So, you know, everybody will be familiar with the FME desktop product. Obviously, most of you will be familiar with the FME server product, and then obviously there's the FME Cloud one. And all cloud is really just server, where you purchase the infrastructure. So you haven't got to worry about finding your own server, finding your own bandwidth. You know, you just use it on the cloud. You pay by the hour. You can subscribe to it, and you can just get all the benefits of FME server. But really, the server and cloud products are about making those workspaces that you author on your desktop available to everybody in an organization, or to, you know, your citizens if you're a local authority or a government department and you actually want to do that wider engagement. Now you can use those to go externally as well as your own internal business customers. So it's very much now as an integration platform, and it's begun to take all of that data and start to publish it out. And part of the reason why this is becoming quite important is that, you know, we have this wonderful quote from The Economist, and everybody's saying that, you know, data is now more valuable than oil. And it's that same kind of rush that we had, you know, decades ago, looking for sort of all the oil resources, and now people are looking for data. You know, everybody wants data. They want to analyze that data. Everybody's talking about machine learning and things, artificial intelligence, but it all comes back to just data. You know, organizations have large amounts of it, and a lot of it is really untapped. You know, it's not utilized as much as it could be. It's not really joined up between departments and things. So actually, this is kind of where SAFE are coming from. They want to be able to start to help organizations tap into this data, make that data available, and actually give people data in a timely and robust fashion. And they're a North American company, so they have a wonderful mission statement, and that very much is to kind of help you maximize the value of that data set.
Just on that, Gavin, around that statement around data is the new oil. I was at a conference recently and they were saying that it's actually far more valuable. With oil can only be consumed once, where with data, the more of it you ingest, the more valuable that data becomes. I thought that was a really interesting take because we've all heard that line before, that data is the new oil. But again, oil, as we know, it can only be consumed once in your car or in your truck, whatever it may be. But again, with data, the more of it you consume, the more valuable it becomes. And I just thought that was a nice afterthought on that statement when you hear it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things again that leads into all the FME apps and the FME kind of processing is to be able to say, well, actually, I can keep pulling that data out in a sustainable way. Once you've done it once, you build that process. It's just a repeatable process that you can use, get more information out of that data and things, and distribute it. And I think one of the key reasons that we're seeing the server apps as being quite an exciting area that SAFE have launched is because FME's always been in organizations, but it tends to be very siloed. So one particular department might have paid for the FME server, they'll be running some workspaces on it, a few scheduled tasks, and it'll just be that particular part of the organization who gets the benefit from it. It's not really gone out as wide as it could have done potentially. And that's really kind of why I think SAFE are really pushing at the moment, and we're quite keen to explore as well, is to say, well, things like these server apps, we've now got a very easy way of actually reaching out to a wider part of the organization so that other users can quite easily come in and consume those data sets and run with them as well as part of that process. And that kind of ties into the self-service kind of an automation model. And it's very much that, the idea of the server apps is it's automating processes. We've very much got that left-hand side, which is, probably most people's inbox. It's everybody's got a huge number of things to do. People are coming and asking for data, but their priority might not be as high as the other priorities you have on your list. A lot of people will be swamped with things to do. And, just delivering small amounts of data or meeting small data requests, is unfortunately always going to end up getting bumped down that priority list and things. So the idea with the self-service is to say that actually those sorts of users can come in, they can grab that data on demand, they can automate all of that process. And also because it can be done in an authoritative manner, it means that you've got that consistency around with the data sets as well. So that what you're getting out of your data is going to be a reasonable quality, it's a known quality and things. And that kind of ties into this sort of authoritative data set. Everybody talks about automation and it's normally in that big scary kind of, oh, we're all going to lose jobs, And actually it's kind of flipping it around and saying, well, actually automation is not about removing people's jobs or, getting rid of people who are doing that data processing. It's actually about empowering business owners to get authoritative data sets out to make them more widely available in the organization. An FME user can build a workspace, or FME users can help a business owner build a workspace that captures all of their knowledge data, their understanding of the constraints, the limitations of that data set and things as part of it, the validity of it and things, and actually better make that data available to everybody and say that it's a qualified authoritative source, and people aren't scrabbling around, trying to find bits of data, finding something that's sat on a server that's not been updated for 10 years, is missing information and things are piled up. But actually the important thing is it then starts to free up those people to do the more interesting work, spend time doing some research, doing the analytics, and not just extracting little bits of data here or loading data in and things anymore. So it's really about just empowering those people who have that business knowledge and understanding of the data sets to be able to make that data in a known and authoritative format available to the rest of the organization to use, so they can start to do interesting things with that data. And then hopefully it's that kind of rising tide thing. Everybody starts to get a benefit from it and move forward. And then one of the other
basic, Gavin, is just being able to take your Inspire in terms of getting your internal data sets or your council or utility, whatever it may be, and then pushing that out to data.gov, for example, which I know there's a remit for everybody to start having that done by 2021. So again, when we're talking about it, it doesn't have to be a huge organizational change, as Gavin was kind of alluding to there. Sometimes it's just getting the basics right. So again, just taking your planning data, publishing up your roads data, whatever public data sets is required, putting them into a readable format, whether that's computer or human, and then publishing out there for the public to be able to consume.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. It doesn't have to be big. It can literally be as simple as, if you're getting lots of requests to change, a map info file into a CAD file or a CAD file to a map info process, that's relatively simple, but it can be really beneficial to those users. But again, it's not maybe that high priority. So actually using the server apps and things to let those users self-serve with that kind of model, again, it's a really quick win. It's quite simple, but it just helps everybody. It helps the organization, makes that data available. You also know that the conversion is going to be done in a robust manner with the right coordinate systems and things as well from it. And that's really kind of where, Safe will talk a lot about this sort of no code required now. And one of their drivers for FME Server is to actually mean that, you don't have to develop lots and lots of bespoke applications and things, or understand lots of sort of code that, as long as you can basically build a workspace, which is a very graphical process, the same kind of ease of delivery should be there with the server apps and things, so that, you can rapidly build an application to make these sorts of workspaces available to those users. Those sort of data translation ones, aren't a huge project to do. It's a quick win to be able to start to push some of this information out as part of that process. So just to cover a little bit about what an FME Server application is and kind of how it differs from what's already available in FME Server. If you're an FME Server customer, you've ever used FME Server and things, you'll be familiar with kind of the server interface. It's not the prettiest, it's very functional, it's very basic. If you're a technical user who's used to using FME, who's used to using FME Server, it does a really good job. It does exactly what it needs to do to deliver it. But if you're a user who's maybe a field worker, somebody who spends a lot more time in Excel or something, coming in, there's a lot going on. You've got to worry about logins. You've got to understand what this weird workspace service terminology means before you can even get to the sort of published parameters and the bit that you're actually interested in. There's not a lot of description around it either. So, it's very functional. It's straight out the box, but it's not the easiest of tools to use as part of that. And then the other side with FME was you're always able, and you still can, build your own bespoke application. So, IMGS have the web portal that they've used with a lot of customers, with eNet here, that lets you build out your own kind of application. And that's using all the underlying APIs, the JavaScript kind of technology that comes with FME Server to build a bespoke application. And it's, I'll always say it's not very difficult to do. It's quite a straightforward process, but you've got to have a little bit of those JavaScript skills, a little bit of understanding of web development and things to be able to pull it together. And that's not typically a skill set a lot of FME users will have. It's also something that you have to go and do that development. There is work there to actually pull that all together. So you kind of ended up with those two extremes, and that's really where the FME Server apps have been introduced to kind of bridge that gap, to give you a simple application that you can make available to all of your users very, very quickly, that hides some of that complexity. And okay, it's not going to have the same functional richness as if you built your own bespoke application, and there's still a role for those bespoke applications, but it does mean that you can rapidly pull something out without need to worry about a lot of code and things. So just to take you through, this will just demonstrate how the FME Server apps work. So we've just got FME Server here. You can come in, and you'll see on the left-hand side there now, we've got this Server Apps application. So this is very much coming in as, probably an administrator to look at creating and running them. You can also run them from just the URL. So once you've got the URL here, it will jump out, and that's all you need to be able to come in and use one. So this is just taking some data from the valuation office, pulling a county, pulling a category, and we'll generate a report. So you can see at the top, we've got a little bit of branding around it. We've got some description, some links there around what the different parameters mean, but we've got just nice simple drop downs they can go through, search, we can run the data, and it's going to come through, and it should generate a report that we can then see. It disappeared off the end of the video. So I'm going to jump back a little bit. So when it completes it, we'll end up, and in this case, it's a HTML report, because we've done a lot with the HTML reporting. It's a nice, easy way, especially with a website, to actually be able to deliver information back to a user quickly. But equally, this could be a download. The data could come back as a spreadsheet, could come back as CSV, Word report or something as part of that. It doesn't have to come back, as a straight HTML. Just the nature of the fact we're running a web app just means it's a nice way of actually starting to return information to the users as well as part of that process.
It's also worth highlighting quickly, Gavin, just that the IMGS logo at the top of Server Apps, again, that's just our logo that's in there. So again, valuation was in the body. That could be obviously your county councils or your utilities logo that's up there, and then you can have an additional logo internally in it. So there's a few different areas where you can customize it. Same as on the report, we have IMGS at the top, but again, that could be your evaluations office, for example, logo, then a disclaimer, then afterwards just below it, and yeah.
Yeah, and so with the reporting, the world really is your oyster. You get to develop that as much as you want. We'll see in a second how the apps, where you can start to do some of that customization. And obviously, like Garrett mentioned, we can put our logo in. So obviously, we put the IMGS logo in, but you can start to customize that around, with a little bit of your own brand colors, your own brand logo as well as part of that process. So if I just jump forwards. So actually, in terms of creating the server apps, they are relatively straightforward. So you can see in the example here, if you ever used any of the FME server ones, you're probably familiar with the standard data download examples they have. So, as Garrett was just alluding to, we've got the heading image along the top there. So you can start to change that out, whatever image that you want. So, we've typically gone for a corporate logo. Here, they've gone for something that's a little bit wider. It's got a little bit more sort of map context and look and feel to it. And you can change that background color. So they've gone for a nice bright yellow, but you can obviously pick something that blends with your brand. I'll quite often go with the white because it works very nicely with our kind of branding, and it always looks, quite nice from a modern sort of web page perspective. But obviously you can tweak that to what you want. You'll also notice at the very top there, you can change the title and the little logo as well. So again, you can bring that in line with your internal branding. So we'll always use the IMGS logo up there, but obviously your individual organization will probably have its own logo that just sits at the top and makes that tab a little bit more distinct in the browser. And then we've got those sort of title and description, which is where we saw the valuation agency's logo, and that's a bit more descriptive text in there. And it really just allows you to put more context to explain what all those different parameters mean. So now if you've got users who maybe aren't that familiar with it, somebody can quickly come in, read that kind of descriptor and understand, oh, that's what the layer to download means, that's what the output format means, all these different selection boxes. And obviously then you can see we've got those typical drop downs that have come through. So we've got our output formats, everything you'd be familiar with seeing from building a workspace are just published up there. And obviously all of that's driven from the published parameters. So whatever published parameters you create are basically what will get exposed to your web app, in just the same way as it would do through the Workbench interface. It's the same with the server apps as well as part of that process. So just in terms of creating them, again, it's really quick. We just go to that server apps page, top right, we can click on create. We can give them a name. The name has to be unique, and there are some constraints so that you can't put in things like spaces, and that's because it basically becomes part of the web URL. So that name at the top is what you're going to see in the web URL when you publish your workspace. And then we can put some description in. And again, we can put as much or little information in here as you want. If it's going to be something internal, it's quite simple to run. You might not need a lot. If you've got something that is a bit more complicated, you can push a little bit more information in here. And it uses markdown text. So if you've not come across it, it's basically a way of styling text to say what becomes, bold, what's going to be a header. So it's very similar to if you sort of write HTML code and things as part of that as well. You can also see how good I am at spelling, if I misspell anything as part of these.
It's okay, I'm terrible at it as well.
And obviously, as we go through, we can start to add web links. So in this case, we can just put a link back to the IMGS page, but it might be a link to a bit more information about the data set. So we could have linked out to something describing NACE codes, for example, in a bit more detail. We can put links in for images, and then we can go through, set that to be a header. We can set some things to be bold, all the kind of things you'd expect to be able to do from styling your text up. And I'll put a little image in. The only thing you will find is that at the moment, the images are displayed at the size of the image. There's no rescaling. So you'll be able to look at do a preview, and you'll find that the image there is actually ridiculously large. So you can't set the size. You'd have to come back through and set it in the actual physical image size. Then you just choose the repository, the workspace you want to run, the service you want to associate it with. So in this case, we're going to use the streaming, and then how long you want the security token that drives this to last. So in this case, they're set by default for 10 years. So we'll just take the 10-year default. And then you can choose the parameters that you want to publish. So if there are some that you don't want, you can untick them. You can also change the options as well to say whether you want it to be or what the defaults are going to be. And then lastly, we can just customize the appearance. So we can give it a title, which is obviously what we just saw. We can choose the background color, and then you've got the heading image and the icon. So the heading image is what you see across the top as that banner, and then the icon is what appears in that top left tab on the actual sort of Chrome or Internet Explorer tab. So again, you just want to pick something that reflects what those are going to be. And then we click on OK, and then basically we get that link, and you can send that link around to anybody, and then they're then able to access that web application. So you can see that they're actually really quick. I mean, I think that takes about 2 minutes to run through, and most of that's actually setting up the description and things as part of them. So they are very, very simple to build. You don't have to have a lot of expertise, but it means you can get something out very quickly that people can start to interact with and run through.
It's worth probably noting that you've made that look ridiculously easy, even for myself, and I've seen it being done before, but obviously that's a really, really great way of showing how quickly we put together. But I suppose it does stem from that workspace, that business need from a user, where that workspace has been created. It's already kind of connected to the data sources, and then from there, you're just publishing up for people to self-serve. And I think that's probably worth mentioning when you look at how simple that is to do. But again, you have to remember there's a workspace in behind that, where you probably, as an IT person or as a GIS officer, and where you probably sat down with someone and kind of worked out their business requirements, what data they wanted to bring together, and then obviously put in that report so they can then get self-serve.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. It's, those workspaces, and some of the ones we'll come on to shortly, the actual process for building that workspace is probably maybe 2 hours to put everything together, to pull the data sets through, to find information, to build it, publish it. The actual publishing of that web app, is the last 2 minutes on the end, so it means that, it's always back to the understanding of the data, having the business knowledge, what's appropriate, how does it hook together, that's the key part. And then the web apps are just that nice kind of icing on the cake at the end to actually make that available. So rather than there having to be, oh, I'm going to have to come into that kind of really nasty kind of FME interface that's quite technical for somebody, or I'm going to have to go and code my own interface, you can just quickly build something and actually make a workspace that's got a lot of value tied up into it, easily available for other people. Mm-hmm. And then just briefly on security, it's all token driven. So if you have the URL, anybody can access the app. So at the moment, it's kind of security through obscurity, in that, unless you've got it, you're probably not going to be able to find the app to be able to run it. But obviously that is a bit of a concern if you're pushing financial information things through. If you did suddenly want to remove access to the app, you can just go into the FME admin user on the top right there, select manage tokens, and you can now see all the tokens that are available. So we've got our app ones there. So we just better click on it and remove that token or disable the app. And then you'd remove access to the application.
Gavin,
there are ways
for one of the councils that are using server apps, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Cork, who are using it for financial reporting. You created a username and login for that, didn't you?
Yes, so you can work around that. So at the moment for 2019, there is a workaround that you can start to build your own logic in, which is actually relatively straightforward, but it's just a little bit more detailed than actually just using a straight server app. You have to take the username and password, check that that's authentic and it's valid against the FME Server REST app, and then run the rest of the application through. So, you have to do a little bit more work, but it's perfectly doable with 2019. One of the nice things with 2020 is Safe have recognized that that's a little bit of a barrier. And obviously the first thing that everybody asked was, oh, can we have security? Pretty much hotly followed by, oh, can we have a map as well? So the 2020 releases will give us the security with authentication. So you'll be able to toggle authentication on, and then from the allowed users list, you'll be able to choose which users you want to do or which roles you want to make available. And that comes from the FME Server Security. So those users and roles are defined with the FME Server Security and then just applied to the web app. And then when you log into a web application, you'll just get a security kind of challenge form to say, log in here, and then that will take you into the app. And that will streamline that process. And that should come in FME 2020. It's already there in the beta, so you can play around with it. And then the mapping, I think, is scheduled for the .1 release, so it'll probably be in the summer. And then that will give you the option to be able to draw a map box, on those kind of base maps, and actually start to put an area of interest in. So somebody could say, I want to download data for this particular region, or I want, all planning applications that happen to fall within this box that I've drawn. And you better pass that sort of spatial information back into that part of that workspace as well. There are more enhancements coming to the GUI. It's relatively basic at the moment, but there is stuff that will come in. It probably won't be the 2020 release. We're looking at more at 2021. But Safe are definitely going to continue developing this. So it's going to be something that's going to get a richer user experience as it evolves as well as part of that. And obviously Safe are looking for feedback. So if you find a business case or a use case that you're trying and it doesn't quite meet it, let us know, because we can pass that back into their requirements, because things like the security, the mapping have all been driven by users coming back and going, this is really good, but we need to do X, Y, and Z for us as well. And then the next part of it that sort of sits alongside the server apps is the webhooks. And the webhooks really are just a way of third-party software programmatically running a workspace. So you can run through, build the workspace, and the other application does it. So rather than the app and the user coming in and manually doing it, this is one application talking to another. And a really good example is something like Survey 123. We can set up a webhook there so that every time a survey is done, so somebody goes out and inspects an asset, it'll actually fire a message into FME Server, and FME Server can process that data as it's coming in. One thing you've probably noticed if you had a look at webhooks is they're not really, strictly speaking, new. It's the same kind of URL calling technology that was in FME, right the way back to probably its earliest releases. They've just brought it back in under this webhook banner now. They've polished it a little bit as well. So it's a lot more improved. It's a lot more intuitive to use. It also means that things like the token security that were very, very black box up until this release are actually now a lot more transparent. We've just seen that security option where we can see the tokens available. Our webhook tokens show up there as well. So just as a quick example, we've just put together a really quick speed sign collection application just with Survey 123. And the idea is that we can collect our survey information out in the field. When we submit that survey information back up, the system behind the scenes calls that webhook, sends that information to FME. And in this case, we've actually got it to email the user. So it might be that we find a high priority defect and people need to be notified of that. So on those kind of high priority ones, we can generate an email that will come back and fill it in. So in the app, the guy goes out in the field, says the sign's being, hit by a car, it's been damaged. We can add a photo in, we can send that back. This one we can sign off the report, and all of that information gets pushed up into the cloud, and FME is just sitting there listening. So as the information goes back up, Survey 123 calls that webhook and passes the information to FME Server. An FME Server will sit there, it runs through that information, and it will actually send us an email with that details on, or it could generate a Word report, or it could, do any of the other things you can do in an FME workspace. It's really just a trigger, so it's just passing information through. So in this case, we've done an email because it's nice and easy to demonstrate. We've got all the information there, the location, the descriptions, we've got a little photo and things as part of that workflow as well. So, the webhooks are really powerful for starting to create those sort of application to application type capabilities. And they're relatively straightforward to create as well. And again, as Garrett was alluding to before, they're all driven by a workspace. So in this case, we've just got a simple text reader, and then the webhook in this example coming back here from Survey 123 is all JSON. So we're just pulling information out of the JSON file. And then actually what we're doing is sending that information to an FME Server job submitter, which basically just triggers another workspace. So the second workspace takes that data, looks up the record and A goal, pulls some other information together, and then piles all that into an email and sends it out. And we've just decoupled the process. So the first one is really just listening for that message and then getting the information it needs to trigger the rest of the workflow. And it's something that is going to get better in 2020 as well, but it ties into the whole FME Server automations. So it's where with the automations, we can now start to build these orchestrated processes. And again, those webhooks become a really good trigger to actually start that process. And we could have used the JSON reader here as part of this process because we know we're getting JSON back. I've used the text one because it's a nice bucket. So if you're not sure what's going to come back from your third-party application, you can use that text line and it will just consume everything. And then once you've kind of got that feedback, you can start to play around with it. So just in terms of creating them, again, we can just come in, we can find particular workflow or workspace we're looking for. So in this case, it's our Survey 123 webhook workspace. And we'll come through and we'll see, we don't really have a lot of published parameters. This one is a nice simple workspace. It's just the source text file. And under the advanced option, you'll see we've got another location to create a server app. We've also got the ability to create our webhook. And then we've got the published parameter, which is essentially the message that comes in, which is where the data is going to get pushed to. So in this case, again, we can create a description, we can create an expiry date. So by default, these are set to a year. So I'm just going to tweak that to bring it down just to a couple of months. We can change the description, we can change the token name. I would say it's a good thing to describe your token names to make them more obvious. It's very easy once you've got lots of them to lose track of which one does which. So, spending a little bit of time putting that token name, the description content in, that sort of metadata really does become quite useful. And we can also tweak any additional permissions if the workspace needs additional permissions. And again, we can tweak the resource or parameters if we need to. And then that's essentially all there is to them. So if we hit that OK, this will just take us through basically the webhook page, and it shows us we've got the ability to download it, which is a one-time thing, which basically takes all of that information, creates it into a text file, and stores it. So it's a good thing to store that file somewhere safe so that you can retrieve the information, the details about it at a later date. And then you've got the two security options. So you can either use it as a header in HTML, or you can use it as a query string, which is basically where the token gets appended to the end of the URL. So we can just copy that one. We can go into our survey application under webhook. And literally it's as simple as pasting that URL string in, giving it a name, choosing the event data and things we want to pass back. And then that links the Survey 123 application back to our FME server. And as soon as the server gets a record that's either new or edited in this case, it's going to fire that information to FME, and FME can do its processing. And we've got customers who are using Drupal to do a similar thing, so you can use Drupal sort of there. It can be other financing systems and things. It's just, Survey 123 is just a nice example of showing it. It doesn't have to be that. It can be, your own web application, for example, as part of that process as well. So the webhooks really are about sort of system-to-system integration. We've got the server apps that are kind of more end-user sort of human interactions, and then lastly, we've kind of got our FME Data Express app. And this is an app that's available on Android and the Apple Store under iOS. You can just go on, download it. It's a freely available app. So, you can just pull that data down, and then it will let you connect to your FME server. The only thing with these, and the same with the Survey 123 application, is your server has to be externally accessible. If you're running, just on a 4G signal or out in public, or you'll need a VPN connection. So if you want to come back into your server, your server's in your internal network, you'll just need a VPN so you can see it. So basically, these rely on, you being able to see your FME server instance when you're mobile. Or use the FME Cloud. Again, that frees that up because that cloud's available globally, so it's very easy to start to access that one. So it works very well with the mobile clients. But no, we've got a lot of customers who have, reverse proxy in place, so that exposes their FME server externally, or have a VPN connection. So just as a quick demo, we've taken the same speed sign kind of concept we were looking at before with the Survey 123 application, and we've built a workspace that does the same thing. So, it has the different published parameters for things like the GPS location, the speed, the photos we want to collect back in again. We've published that up to FME Server. We've turned that into an FME Server app, and then that FME Server app URL just gets fed into FME Data Express, and then we can do that same kind of form submission on the mobile with the Data Express app as we did do with the Survey app. So just go in, we can choose particular one we want, and then we can just go through, it's the same kind of widgets, map kind of location that you'd be familiar with from any other kind of mobile app. And they do have feature parity between iOS and Android. So what you can do on iOS, in this case, you'll be able to do with the Android version as well. Safe tend to be a little bit further ahead with the iOS one because they're kind of more of an Apple shop. But they're aware that especially the European market's obviously much more probably Android focused for some of the public sector especially, so they'll go through. So yeah, we can add our images, and when you hit run, that just submits that job to FME Server. So it's not quite as shiny as probably some of the other apps, but it's functionally there. You can go through, we've submitted that job and we can run that process. And in this case, it's just generating a Word report behind the scenes. We don't need that sort of user feedback straight away to the user necessarily to say that's been done, but we can generate the reports. It might be you're doing a housing inspection, for example, or a site inspection. The guy out in the field creates the information, collects it, and then you can basically push that back. And those reports are automatically generated and stored locally on a server somewhere, without somebody having to come back into the office, link everything up and develop it. And also, it's just, the app is what Safe have created. They are spending a little bit of time improving it. There's QR code support. So one of the applications you could do is if you have all your assets tagged with QR codes, you can select those QR codes when you're filling those forms in. So you can say, well, okay, I'm going to take a picture of that asset's QR code, which then pre-populates some of the information and things through as part of that.
And the barcode, I think, is also coming along from the sneak peek we got yesterday from FME 2020.
Yep, so it'll be the same concept. If something's barcoded and things, QR coded, you can just pick those asset tags up.
Yeah, like Dublin City, for example, all their bins have QR codes on them. So again, I'm sure a lot of councils or utilities would have maybe QR codes or are planning to put QR codes on their assets so their mobile teams can just go in and scan it. So I guess instead of having to spend X amount of money on a mobile data collection app, and there's loads out there, again, FME Server could, if it's just basic information you're taking, like has the bin been damaged, is there graffiti, does something need to be replaced, again, scan the QR code using Data Express, get up the attribute information, fill in that form like what Gavin had showed, and then again send that back. That could be sent to, I don't know, an engineering team to come out and actually clean the bin or do the maintenance or order the part or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so the app's completely free. So, you know, if you've got FME Server, you can use that app. You can use it. It's straight out the box functionality. It's just using workspaces, you know, that you're already kind of building and working with and things. So it does fit very nicely into those sorts of existing data workflows. It's just kind of that last sort of man out in the field bit that they're doing. You know, and if it's not quite what you need, you know, if you've got a little bit of in-house development skill, you want to play around with the mobile apps, you know, it's just using the same kind of APIs and things that sit behind the rest of FME to leverage that, so you can make a bespoke app relatively simply. But it's that same process with the FME Server app. You've kind of got the out-of-the-box server app that will give you, you know, probably 85% of the functionality most people need. And if, you know, there's that last little bit you want something very bespoke, you've still got that option to be able to develop your own app that sits within that kind of ecosystem as well. So it's quite a powerful tool and set of powerful capabilities there as well. So just really to kind of round it off, there's probably the, you know, if you do ever need more information about FME Server or anything FME related, then we'll always point customers to the Knowledge Center. You'll probably always hear me evangelize on about it, but you know, it's a really good resource for information. Safe to have a specific how-to on FME Server Apps. So there's one there that's got a little bit more information. There's some more information on some of the webhooks there as well. They are putting together one for the FME Data Express app. If anybody does want to use it, it's still probably from a documentation point of view, a little bit basic with what they've got. Safe are aware of that, and the teams are actively writing stuff as we speak to do that. But if anybody's using it and struggling, just give us a shout. We've been playing around with it a little bit. We've had a chat with Safes. Some of the ways you pass location stuff in aren't necessarily always the most obvious on some of the systems. So if there's something there that we've said it can do and you can't find it, just give us a yell and we can help you through it. It's actually quite a straightforward application, to be fair. And I suppose lastly, obviously a bit of a shout out for the World Tour, May the 11th. We do have Don Murray, who is the founder of Safe Software. That's quite a big thing. The guys don't normally come out for the World Tour events into Europe and things. So
least of all to little old Ireland. I think it's been nearly 9 years, I think, since last time. I think it was Dale that was over last time. So yeah, it's going to be a huge deal to have him over.
Yeah, I'm possibly very fanboy at the moment. It's kind of quite exciting to have him out. And to be fair, Don's, they very, very much like to engage with their customers. They're very enthusiastic about talking to you guys, finding out what you're doing. So, you know, they're going to be really interested to hear what you guys have got to say and want to do. So it's a great chance, you know, to really influence them and see what they're up to and kind of hear it straight from the horse's mouth as well. So, you know, if you're free on May the 11th, we definitely recommend coming. I still find them hugely useful. You know, I've been doing FME for a long time now. I still learn new things. It's great to talk to other users. It's a real chance to see things. Did you want to chat through this one?
Yeah, as well. And then again, just talk about other upcoming events as well. So IMGS will be launching, well, I suppose we've already heard us speak about our data intelligence platform. So we have our geospatial intelligence, which is combined with Hexagon and with FME. We also have our data intelligence platform, which is Talend, Snowflake, and Sisense. Talend, which you've probably heard us speak about already, which is an ETL platform, which brings in data governance, data stewardship, data preparation. Snowflake, which everybody's probably seen in the news lately. I think the new value at $3 billion. So again, it's a highly responsive data warehouse in the cloud. And then Sisense is our BI, our visualization tool. So again, we're going to be doing a little launch event in the city centre on the 23rd of April. We'll be inviting a few people along. So again, just looking at the list, if you one or two people, I'm sure that'll be interested in attending. So just to let you know that it's coming up.
Yeah, and I was going to say that was everything I had to go through. I guess it's just to kind of say that, you know, there are those different options there, and certainly the server apps are a really easy way to start to make FME go more broadly across an organization. That's quite a quick win to develop. Obviously, then you've got things like the webhooks to let you do that, some more bespoke integration between different applications. And then sort of lastly, there is that sort of now mobile stuff starting to develop. And you can use that not just for the web apps, but for any repositories. So if you want to run a workspace from home, you can just sit there on your phone now and run the workspaces from there as well as part of that.
Lovely. Brilliant. Thanks. We actually have quite a lot of questions, and I'll do our best to try to get them through. Some I know, but just looking at we can't answer straight off the bat. But what we'll do is we can come back to you directly and answer. So when the first one up, Gavin, and it's for you, how does the workspace, how does it work for two-part workspace patterns? For example, you might use a workspace runner for doing bulk transformations. For example, a workspace runs it.
So it would depend a little bit on what the application was doing. You can do a server app. So we've worked with a couple of customers, and actually that security example we touched on for 2019 is that you can have a workspace that will run with the app, and then will generate a HTML page, for example, that the user can start to interact with. So it might be that it goes away and does a database query to say, these are all of the instance that happened in this particular date. And then you'd have an option to say, well, show more information or generate a report. You'd click on that, and that runs a second workspace and things to actually pull stuff back. So you can start to build those sorts of workspaces through. If they are multi-part ones with the webhooks and things, again, it depends a little bit on what you've got, but this is where sort of linking into the automations and starting to drive some of the automations as part of your process, because then you really can start to do all those parallel sort of enterprise type design patterns.
Brilliant. That was it was quite a good question as well. When it came in, I was actually curious myself. The next one is FME Server Apps. They look great. A question would be for a public site. So would use it from a public site perspective where there is no authentication should be required. Is there any way to add, say, a Google reCAPTCHA for form to protect from spam? Sorry, it's a bit of unusually written. So again, so if you had a public facing where there was no authentication, could you put in something like Google reCAPTCHA to stop that particular site getting spammed?
Ooh, that's a good one. Out of the box, no. It's one we can pass back to safe, because that's actually probably a fair design consideration. What would control the process would be the workspace behind the scenes. So obviously the workspace is run, that's determined by your engines. So you'd be able to put a little bit of logic probably behind the scenes to stop it just spamming out vast number of requests and things as part of that. So you'd have to build a little bit around on the back end in the workspace to deal with that. But yeah, it would depend on how much of a concern that was, to whether you wanted to, or how far you went down that route.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I know we've done some stuff around reCAPTCHA ourselves, but that was more kind of calling out to it on a different page outside of FME. But no, I think it's a good question. But what we'll do is we'll raise it with safe, and we'll get back to you. We'll send you on the ticket ID. The next one down is FME Cloud. You noted you can pay per hour. How much does it cost to keep it running 24/7? I suppose with FME Cloud, most of the customers that use it here in Ireland, they have you can buy an annual subscription. Off the top of my head, I think it's around 8.5K, and that's for an annual subscription to have FME Cloud externally, which is like having your external server. You have that secure connection between each other, and like for instance, a few councils would use it for pre-planning, for tracking their mobile library, so they update their map on ArcGIS Online on their public portal and stuff like that. In terms of the pay-as-you-go cost, I don't know. I do know another council used to use Cloud for their pre-planning, and I think it was only costing them 20 or 30 euro a month, because obviously it was quite small requests that were coming in. But it's a good question. What I'll do is I'll come back to you directly, and I'll send you on some information on Cloud and possibly what it could come down to. But it is a bit of how long's a piece of string, depends how much data is being processed, if you're storing anything up there, etc. But there is a calculator up on the Safe website, and I'll send that on to you.
If you're running 24/7, then you get a 60, or if you get the subscription, it's a 60 to 70% discount. So if you're running for a whole year and things, that's definitely worth or the route to go. And then it comes down to sort of a bit of a balancing exercise. If you're running it 24/7 for 3 months, is that going to be cheaper to pay the hourly rate versus subscription? So it's a little bit of a, just look through your requirements and things, but obviously we can help with that.
Yeah, and that's where the calculator comes in, which is brilliant as well. The next one down is FME Express. Can you share the demo URL so we can review it?
Yeah, I can't see why not.
Sure.
Yeah, so if anybody's got their own one, then you can build your own one so long as you're on your own network. Just download the app, point it at your server, and you're fine.
Yeah, and go away. Yeah. The next one is Data Express is the topic. QR codes. Do you have an example of where this is in use? Can you share any information on that? Again, not where it's being used. I suppose QR codes, as I know Dublin do, and Dublin City have all of their bins tagged. I don't know the process and how they use with the actual waste management team. But again, I can find that out, and I'm sure Gavin and I can probably pull out a couple of examples globally of people using that app, and I can share that around.
Yeah, I know the reason the QR codes are in there is because they've had a asset management requirement come up from a large customer, which basically said, oh, can we do this? So they've added that in for that customer. So it is being done. And
true. I even know from a council standpoint, some councils actually have QR codes on their actual desktops. So everything is an asset. So not just external assets where we think of land banks or buildings. Again, sometimes those assets are servers, desktops, screens, etc. So again, you could create an app for an internal IT person or administrator to go around and scan and do, I don't know, a condition check on internal assets as well. So again, another use case for it. The next one is, so Data Express app is a viable alternative to mobile GIS. Requirements for from a public-facing server. Can access be controlled through Active Directory?
so access would be controlled through Active Directory, but it's done through FME Server itself. So you link your FME Server with Active Directory, and once FME Server knows about your Active Directory, those users just become part of the FME Server list. So all the authentication is done via normal FME Server security in the same way when you log in. It's just different ways of accessing it. So if you've configured your server for Active Directory, the web apps and everything will inherit that going forwards.
And I suppose just that comment there about it being a viable alternative to other GISs, and I know we showed Survey 123, but obviously Hexagon have their own, and there's a few other options that are out there used by different councils in terms of mobile. What do you find, or yourself, and this is more a question for myself, Gavin, what do you see the limitations in using Data Express versus a mobile GIS? I know it's not as rich in terms of functionality, but if it is just basic requirements, do you see any downsides to using it?
No, I mean, there's only probably two negatives in that, and they're not strictly negatives. One is it does kind of assume you're always online. So it doesn't have an offline mode at the moment. That is a recognized issue, and they are looking at that to start to implement that. So again, it's still relatively early days for the Data Express app. It's only been out less than 12 months, I think, if I remember correctly. So that's obviously been an identified requirement. The other one is probably the look and feel is a little bit functional. You can tell it's been designed by an engineer probably rather than a web designer and things. It's not the prettiest, but that is probably the only other real negative against it. In terms of your ability to capture data, upload information and things back through with FME, it's very robust. It's very quick. Everything you kind of need is there. It captures point location currently, but again, they're looking at letting you capture potentially lines, polygon information, and also access to more of the sensors. So things like if you've got a compass bearing type values and all the kind of weird, wonderful things you have on your mobile now, to collect that information as well. So it's definitely kind of a developing app. And if you've got requirements, again, let us know because we can put them in. Because at the moment they're developing stuff because it looks cool. But they're also then saying, well, actually, if customers come back, that's the stuff we'll put in first because we want to put the stuff in that customers are using. If customers are asking for it globally, they're probably all asking the same thing.
Brilliant. Thanks. The next one is around the architecture. So you noted using the reverse proxy approach. Do you have a list of customers that might have taken this approach or best practice in the same interested from a security perspective? I guess on this I know myself, so there's probably about 4 or 5 customers that have gone the reverse proxy approach. Other customers have just gone with cloud externally because there is a secure connection between the two. I do have a list. Actually, I don't know if I can give you the list, but what I can do is we do have a best practice guide, which we created quite recently for another customer. So just to kind of for IT departments of how we would advise going about it. So absolutely, I can share that with you.
Yeah, and I mean VPN. If your organization has VPN, which a lot of organizations now do on mobile phones and things and mobile devices to bring them back into the corporate network, then again, if you've got that VPN set up, that means you haven't got to worry about any of those reverse proxies because you'll just come back in through the VPN route to access things, which does actually make life a lot easier.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'm just conscious of time, so there's only 5 minutes left and still a good few questions, so we're just going to fly through these. So again, Gavin, this is for you. So for cloud, does the data you are working on get published up, or does the workspace run locally?
On cloud, the workspace would live on the cloud instance, and the data would go via the cloud and be processed on that cloud instance. Now you can set FME Cloud to run in Ireland, so it's got an Irish data center, so you can stay in country with it all when it's processed, which again is one of the advantages of things like the Data Express app. It's all local. You then have to link that back into your organization to move the data around, but that's not a huge challenge. Once you're talking from internal application to a cloud application, you can lock that down through the firewall rules and things as well to move that data, so it's quite secure.
Lovely. Next one is, sorry, will you click on the next one, Tanya?
It's an offline question.
Yeah, brilliant, sorry. Okay, yeah, so there's another one then, sorry, next one. Okay, does the FME Data Express app let you run workspaces that aren't published as an app?
Yes, so you can go in and access your FME server, and every workspace that you have permissions to see on your server is available to run. Obviously, there's, if you wanted to suddenly upload a 30 gigabyte, image from your mobile, you might have slightly more challenge. But certainly, if you've got small apps and things, or you've got something that's just information that can be fed in, then it will run quite happily from there. Or if it's running from data you've got on your servers and things, so it's quite flexible around that side of things.
That's actually a really good question. Can I add my own mapping to the new web app map view?
It's on the list. We're not sure if it'll make it into the initial cut, but if it's not in the initial cut, it's going to follow very quickly along afterwards. So if we're aware of the requirement, it should let you add your own WMTS behind it. It's just whether it's been enabled in the initial release or whether that's we're going to add that in a .1 release. So if you don't get it in the current version, it will be coming very soon.
Very good.
Yeah,
no, that actually sounds quite positive. Yeah. Can web apps create their own forms for further input?
Oh, sorry, can you just repeat that one?
Sure. Can web apps create their own forms for further input?
Yes, so you can have your, basically with the HTML, you can have a web form that will drive or come back, and that can be something that you can create and then serve back into that client. So the web app just basically triggers the process, and then you might put in a couple of details. It will give you another form to fill in further information or more specific about a particular area, and then so on. And you can build it as complicated as you want from that point.
Okay, so I didn't actually understand that. So basically I could input some parameters, it will kick off another workspace, but then will give me another server app with more information about that particular, the input that I had selected. So I had picked, I don't know, a fixed or a bus stop. So then it will give me another list of questions specific to a bus stop, where if I picked a bin, it would give me a different set of questions. Yeah,
no, it wouldn't. It could be another app, or it could be just a HTML page you design yourself to go through. So you've got either option. So it could be that you might have an initial landing page that says I've got 4 different options, and you click on one and it takes you to another web app to fill in that particular set of details. Or it might be a bit like that security example where the initial web app just takes your username and password, and then that feeds it into a workspace that actually streams back another page with the information on it to be able to pass or to fill in, and build up the workflow like that.
Brilliant. One last question, just have a quick look. Yeah, last question. Can we make FME 2019 web apps more secure?
Yep, so that would be that security. So obviously for 2020, it'll be out of the box. It's going to be nice and easy. But if you're on 2019 currently and want to do it, then basically you have that initial, like we're just talking about, page that would have a username, password details. You can check within a workspace against the FME server to see if that user details are actually valid for the particular workspaces that you want to run. And that goes through the FME server REST app, so it's all nice and secure. And then that, if that passes, it would give you the page to fill in all the information and things as part of it. So it's a little bit more involved for 2019, but it's certainly doable, but it gets better in 2020.
Wow. That's everything, guys. Absolutely, it was, again, great session, Gavin, well done, and a great attendance list as well, so it's great to see everybody that was here. Just because the webinar is ending, you have our contact details there, so if there's a question you think of later on over a cup of coffee and like, oh, I never asked it, please pop myself or Gavin a quick email, and we're happy to come back. Yeah, so hopefully see you all at the World Tour in May, so make sure to register if you haven't already, and to meet Don. And we'll also probably plan to do something probably a little bit after. We're just waiting to find out what Don's schedule is. So we might, for a few of the customers, I don't know, stay back for a drink or grab something, a bite to eat afterwards for anybody who might be interested. And we'll send a little bit more information about that later on. Well, thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep. See ya.